Hey there, it's Andy Blanks again from Youth Ministry 360, and we're here on our last teacher prep video for the Gospel Bible Study series. I hope up to this point the lessons have been great for you. I know we sure had a fun time working on them, and I hope your students have really learned a lot and been challenged to really see how the gospel is transforming their lives. On this last lesson, we're really going to sort of end with a real challenge for your students, but we're going to help them sort of in dealing with that challenge. So let's jump right in. We're going to be looking at this last lesson, sort of this idea of the ultimate effect of the gospel impacting our lives is this idea that it can't be contained. You know, by nature, the gospel compels us to share it. You know, it's virtually impossible to kind of keep it quiet. And we're going to look at that during really two stories. And one of them is a little kind of odd. When you first read it, you may be like, okay, why is this in sort of an evangelism slant or an evangelism lesson? But we're going to look at, I think you'll find it makes perfect sense. We're going to look at Jesus telling the story of the vineyard owner and the workers to his disciples. And the reason this makes so much sense is, if you recall, this comes on the heels of Jesus' encounter, Jesus and the disciples' encounter with the rich young ruler, right? Where the guy's obedient, but Jesus knows that the man's money is what's keeping him from truly following Christ, and so the man says, what else must I do? Jesus says, sell all your possessions, give them to the poor, and follow me. And of course, the man, we don't know what happened in the end, but the man sort of walks away frustrated because he was a materialistic guy. And the disciples are kind of looking at this going, oh man, who can get into heaven? If this guy can't get into heaven, this seemingly righteous guy, who can get into heaven? And so Jesus kind of tells this story sort of on the heels of that. And of course, the story is that there's a vineyard owner, and in the beginning of the day, he hires workers for his vineyard. And he goes back and he hires workers again as the day progresses, and then towards the end of the day he hires more workers. At the end of the day, the vineyard worker pays all of the workers equally. So the guys who worked all day pays them what he paid the guys who just come on board, right? And barely done any of the work. And of course the guys who've worked all day kind of grumble. And the vineyard worker basically says, hey, I paid you exactly what I told you I was going to pay you. What's it to you if I want to pay these guys more, if I want to be generous? And of course, the parallel there is the idea that God's grace is for everyone. God lavishes grace on those of us who have walked with the Lord most of our lives. God lavishes grace on the person who makes a deathbed, honest confession of Christ. God's grace is given generously to everyone in between. It's for all people. It doesn't matter how far away they are from God. It doesn't matter what kind of person they are, where they are in their life, what they've done, right? God is generous with his salvation and grace. And so the reason this parable is in this lesson is just to set the table for this idea of, God's grace isn't just confined to nice, happy, clean people who seemingly do right things, right? It's for everyone. We want your students to really, really get that. And then I love the second passage we've chosen. The second passage is, of course, the Jesus healing the man possessed by demons. Remember, this was the guy, this is like super jacked up, right? He was living out in the tombs because this demon had him so crazy they couldn't even bind him with chains. He was just a wild man. So he lives out on the edge of town in like the tombs where they're burying people. And Jesus has this crazy just encounter where he casts a demon out, and the demon comes out and he says, I am Legion, for we're many. And the demon kind of interacts with Jesus and says, don't drive us out, and put us in those pigs instead. So Jesus sends him to the pigs, and the pigs run off the cliff, right? It's kind of a crazy story. Your kids will love it. But something really, really neat happens at the end of this story. The man asks to follow Jesus, and Jesus says, no, kind of going back home, and be with your people. And there's this idea that Jesus has to know, and we're sort of reading between the lines here, so you have to be careful, but it seems like Jesus knows that this guy has just been through so much, and he's been away from his family because of this demon. And like, hey, go back to your family and your people, and just show them what's happened to you. And that's what happens. A guy goes back to his family and he's healed. And they're amazed, and they you can imagine these interactions where they're going, what happened? And he says, this guy Jesus, the Son of God, drove this demon out into these pigs. And so you get this idea of his life transformation powerfully impacted the people in his community. And that's a message for your students. That's evangelism at its heart. And one of the things we're going to help your students kind of do in this lesson is kind of let go of the fact, or have peace with the fact, or release the tension behind the idea that Evangelism has to be some academic argument where they have this canned presentation and all their questions and answers lined out and they're ready for anything and they're going to perfectly answer all questions. You know, there's a place for an academic approach to faith, for sure. But especially in our culture, I think most people want to see, is their life changed? How has Christ changed their lives? Is it authentic? How has the gospel impacted them? We are our own letters, right? And that echoes Paul's word. People look at us and they read our lives and they say, gosh, there's something about you that's so authentic and that's real and that you're selfless and you're loving and all those great things we're supposed to be because of Christ in our life and the gospel in our lives. And the idea is that people would see that and be drawn to God. So we're going to help your students, you're going to help your students there at the end of your lesson work through a guide that helps them share their story in stages and steps. It really helps them kind of articulate it, write it out, and then we're going to give them a chance to practice it with one another. And the idea is that a heartfelt telling of how Jesus impacted their life is one of the best gospel presentations there is. And that's the final sort of thrust in the gospel in this 4-lesson study, is the idea of the gospel transforms us, and ultimately we're messengers of the gospel. In our words and our deeds, we tell the world about Christ. So that's a wonderful bookend for this lesson and this study. As always, if you have any questions or need help with anything or thoughts, email us, give us a phone call, live chat us. We're here to talk with you, and we look forward to it. I hope your 4-lesson study of the gospel has gone great, and I hope to see you on another Teacher Prep video one of these days. Take care.